Good morning, podcast world. This is Chats with Baba, and this is brought to you by the Lighthouse for Academic and Cultural Excellence. The purpose of this podcast is to inform and empower parents of young Black children. It's not just for Black children. And the reason why I focused on it is simply because when we look at some things I'll be talking about today, the gap in terms of math and reading for Black children is basically behind. So this podcast is directed at parents of young Black children, but it's applicable to all children. And their task is to release the natural genius that's in Black children. Black children have untapped and undeveloped gifts. The quality of experience and exposure lays the foundation for life. So the idea is to strive for excellence. Now, having said that, bear with me as I go back over something. In the first newsletter that went out, the very first newsletter, just let me read you what was in the paragraph 1. Today's world requires people to be proficient in reading, mathematics, communication skills, the use of technology, and critical thinking. Okay, today's world, and that world is moving at a very rapid pace. People surviving in that world must be, not should be, must be proficient in reading, mathematics, communication skills, speaking, listening, the application of technology, and critical thinking, the ability to make decisions. Old school thinking, we talk about reading, writing, and arithmetic. New school thinking requires children to know not just the 3 R's, but a more in-depth knowledge and a set of skills. And I was asking in that initial newsletter for parents to go on a journey with me, a journey. And this is not a quick trip, but it's a journey. And in this journey, we're asking you to unlock and help to develop the knowledge and skills needed to be successful as children grow and develop. I further stated that children who weren't proficient by the 4th grade risked failing school. Risk failing school. Now, this week, I was on a webinar with one of the school improvement superintendents, and he was saying that in his work, he's familiar with the research and what they say about being proficient by 4th grade. He modified that statement and said, as he works with superintendents and teachers and administrators across the country, they must be proficient by 1st grade. What he's saying is that if they're not proficient by 1st grade, all teachers are doing is remedial work, making up what they have not developed and or learned. So having said that, I want to kind of go slow today to talk about the importance of this podcast and what the effort is. As in preparation for this morning's chat, I saw a release from ASCD, which is a organization, the Administration of Supervision and Curriculum Development, ASCD. Okay, in this organization is where you have teachers, administrators, curriculum specialists, people who write standards and so forth and so on. My alarm went off when I saw the report that talked about NAEP. You've heard me talk about this in the past, the National Assessment Education Project. This is America's report card on how well children are doing in the content areas of math, reading, social studies, science for the most part. But they basically look at math scores and reading scores. And what it said over a period, they do testing in 4th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade, exit exams, as they call them. The alarm went off when it said that over an 8-year period, math scores had dropped considerably. Reading scores were flat. They didn't go up or down. They just kind of stayed where they were. There's a lot of concerns today about what they call lost learning. I saw a couple of interviews where they were talking to children, elementary school age children, about skills, concepts, and knowledge that should have been learned and or developed. But because of this pandemic, there's been lost learning. You can't move in math from one level to the next without learning prior knowledge and skills. Think about building. Think about math as building blocks. You build on previous blocks as you're moving forward, and the blocks have a tendency to go skyward. You're building upward. That presupposes that children have learned certain skills, mathematics, arithmetic skills. They've learned certain terminology. They've learned certain concepts. Based upon that, teachers build on prior learning, prior knowledge. So all I'm saying, so if you have children in the elementary grades and you notice some gaps, or you notice that they've lost some of their previous learning, what can be done? Well, there are a number of, this presupposes that you have access to technology. There are a number of websites that pretty much lay out what's expected at each grade level. I would suggest you kind of look at those, and I'll try to include some of those in my next newsletter, to kind of look at where your child is in terms of his or her knowledge in math and arithmetic and mathematics. For example, let's say you have a child that is in the 2nd or the 3rd grade. What I always suggest is go back and look at knowledge and skills in the previous 2 grades, whether it's kindergarten and 1st grade, and see if they have mastered those. If not, put some energy and time in helping them to develop what should have been learned at the previous grade. You could also look at and get information from your school district, because school districts are aware of what this pandemic has done. So they're doing all of what they can do to assist in this process. I'm suggesting that whatever it takes to intervene in terms of children's prior knowledge, there should be some way that you would address that. So the last couple of weeks, I've been focusing on teaching math concepts, terminology to young children. The American Academy of Pediatrics, these are baby doctors, talks about the importance of selecting appropriate tools, appropriate toys that's appropriate for using in terms of teaching arithmetic and math concepts and terminology. This is what they say. These are the baby doctors. Play is essential to the optimal development of children as it relates to reading, math, science. Play is essential. So in other words, that is the vehicle that children basically learn through, young children under the age of 5. How they best learn is through play. Now, as parents, we want to rapidly see our children read and do math and count, all those good things. That's important. But I want to go back to something I talked about a couple of podcasts ago. When we talk about school readiness, I talk about a level of readiness that helps them to develop habits of the mind, a thinking readiness, okay? Not just being able to identify letters, colors, numbers, and shapes. I talk about is the mind ready for learning? And the best way to do that is to allow children during those developing years to play. That's how they best learn. I also want to talk to you about how do you help children to develop a healthy attitude towards learning, regardless of whether it's math or reading or science or technology, anything. A lot has to do with motivation. Do they really want to do this? And motivation is something that really comes from within. But externally, that is from on the outside, you can help to develop children's attitude towards learning. Children aren't born to be good learners. I mean, it's something that is developed over time. And this is done by helping children's wanting to learn and having a willingness to learn and their overall disposition when it comes to doing things. Most children are good at learning something. And how do they develop this? They get this through the vehicle of playing. Now, let me stay with math for just a moment. When you are trying to help your children to develop a healthy attitude towards mathematics, observe what they do and playing with their fingers, toes, and things of that nature. So when they get into the preschool years, 2 emerging into 3s and 4s, have things around them or call their attention to things that are around them that has to do with math. They're always counting. They're always ordering things. They're always stacking. They're always doing something that relates to mathematics. You as a parent or as a caregiver, just observe them. And what you want them to do is, as they are engaging, is to enjoy what they're doing. Sometimes there's frustration. Sometimes they turn away from things, and that's okay. Okay, that's perfectly okay. At some point, they will zero in on something that they like. Now, remember, as children are engaging in math type activities, there's some things that you're going to notice some frustrations, and that's okay. If they're making mistakes, how do you learn from mistakes? Okay, that's where your role comes in. If you see them doing something that appears to be incorrect, don't worry about saying that's not right. Look at what they're doing and try to move them towards making the necessary correction. By doing so, they're developing a can-do attitude. I can complete this. I can get this correct. And while they're doing that, your role and responsibility, I would suggest, is to talk math. What is it that they're doing that relates to math? Are they counting? Are they putting things in order? You know, are they, and so forth and so on. So your role is to observe what they're doing and to give feedback. Talk to them about what they're doing. Talk to them about putting things in order. What comes first? What comes second? Talk to them. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3. You want to focus more on the process than trying to get it right. If they understand the process, they will eventually get it right. Excuse me. So the process should include drill, practice, repetition, problem solving. Drill, practice, repetition, problem solving, talking math, asking questions, focusing on the process. That seems to be repetitive, and it is. Think about when coaches are teaching, they drill. They drill until it becomes what I would call habits of the mind. Now, I haven't said very much about specifically on math. I was trying, what I wanted to do in this podcast was to bring to your attention some of the concerns about lost learning and possibly what you might do by reviewing reviewing skills, reviewing concepts, reviewing terminology with them. The other thing that I would suggest is that you play games. There's so much that young children, elementary school children can learn by playing games and exploring things. So playing and learning about math, you want to make sure that it's fun and not a chore. If it becomes a chore, then it becomes frustration and frustrating, and it's a turnoff. So remember, in this podcast, I'm talking more about you helping your children to develop a healthy attitude towards math. Children entering school over the next few years, the next decade, must have a solid foundation because they will be living in a time in this digital era where so much will be determined by their ability to solve mathematical problems, their ability to be able to think critically, their ability to be able to make decisions, and so forth and so on. So with that, just, think about what I've shared with you in this podcast, and think about it all begins with you. Your attitude is going to help determine their attitude and behavior, your attitude. You don't want to visually show frustration and anger and things of that nature. If children are playing or whatever it is that they're engaging in and it becomes a little bit of a chore, redirect their attention to something that is enjoyable and fun for them. So with that, I'm going to stop at this point and address much of what I've been talking about in the November newsletter. So with that, this completes today's podcast. Thank you.